This is the third in our set of Back to Basics presentations. The idea is to help new, inexperienced or returning modelers to get to grips. We've all faced that modeler's block where you haven't done it for a little while, and something like this is intended to give you a bit of an idea of the basics of putting aircraft together. This is the third in the series. It's about wear and weathering, and this evening you've got myself and John Myszka to cover aircraft and AFVs, but in the reverse order. We're going to talk about wear and weathering. We'd be happy to take any questions or comments along the way, and just to make it as interactive as possible. So don't be afraid in putting your hand up. Over to you, John, for AFVs.
I'm making the assumption that once you've built your model tank that you've actually painted it and deckled it, right? So that's a starting point. I will not be covering weathering for wheels or tank tracks. That's another lecture or another talk all in its own. The question I have for you though, can you get a show of hands who actually undercoats their tank in this case with an undercoat? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. Okay, I don't. I mean, if I convert something, if it's plastic, resin, metal, whatever, I just paint a basic coat on it, like green, and then go to town and once the decals are on and sealed. The issue with decals is while they're very thin, they still have a real thickness, and if you don't seal it properly, when you start applying weathering, the weathering is going to catch on the edges of the decal and it's going to overly emphasize them. So you need to seal it 2, 3, 4 coats of clear. In the case of the Matilda, it's I use matte. On an aircraft, you might use gloss. Yeah, I'm an enameler. Most of the YouTube things that you see about weathering and all that are all acrylics now. I do use some acrylics, but the only bad point I've found about it, if you buy a second-hand kit and you dip it in caustic soda, acrylic stays. It doesn't come off. Enamel does. Just an observation. The first thing I would do is put on a wash. Now, on tanks, there's generally a lot of crevices. You know, it's the engine deck that fits. It's a steel plate that fits over the back of the engine. It's held in by bolts and that. There is a crevice around that. On an aircraft, generally there's not.
Not quite so many, no, not quite like.
Yeah. And so the aim is to highlight that crevice. Because when you look at your average car, even if it's white, you look at a car, there is a little black line running right around the door of the car, the boot, the bonnet, your windscreen. So on a model, we're trying to recreate reality. You've got to highlight that. You can't put white in the crack. Now, I use 80% thinners and 20% paint. And I generally you can use black. I like a dark grey. Black is a little bit too harsh. Now, I was going to demonstrate, but thinners, paint, mix it up in a tray, use a fairly pointed paintbrush, load it up with the very thin paint and terps or general purpose thinners, and it's a matter of just touching a point on the crevice, and capillary action will zoom it down the crevice. Now, if you have too much, or where you touch it, it blobs. Get another brush that's got a bit of terps on it and wipe it off. Leave it if you like. I mean, if it's around the fuel cap on the back of a tank, there's going to be spillage. that's not necessarily black, but it will, will pick up dust, dirt. I mean, you look at a bulldozer and the pistons on the bulldozer, all nice and silver where the bit goes in and out. But you look around it, there's all hydraulic fluid and that just collects mud effectively. I use brown. A brown colour paint, doesn't really matter what shade, around things like hinges and that. And again, because they're, well, you look at a hinge, it's got the hinge, it's got the bit in the middle that where it actually pivots and that. There's little cracks in there, that's going to collect dust. So dust is always brown, isn't it? Pretty much. And
dust is,
the other thing is that you've got to remember that every time you put something on the tank, so you've built the tank, you've got the basic colour on it, now you're putting weathering on top of that first coat of paint. Every time you use thinners on it, if you use too much, it's going to melt the paint underneath, and then when it dries, it's going to look crap. So small doses, even several applications on the one thing. The next thing is fading. Now, I brought this one along. It's an Israeli vehicle. It's just one color, sand. There is a technique which is called fading. It's, I think Mig Jimenez, he explained it in one of his books. You put very small dabs of different colors on a section, say the bonnet. You just put different colored dabs on it. Then you get a brush that's been dipped in terps. Good to have a wider brush, not one of these, more flat ones. Dip it in there, get rid of most of it, and then you just mess about with the colors. So again, when you look at your own car, you'll find that there's a bit more dust or something in one area and it's slightly different from the other side of the door. And if you're doing, so that's on horizontal surfaces, if you're doing the edge, so instead of just brushing it left to right to blend all these colors, so you never see the little daub. So if you put a bit of blue in there, you're never going to see a blue spot. But if you put it on the edge of the vehicle, which has the same weathering, you generally stroke it downwards. It just gives you that ever so slightly different color. Dry brushing, silly me. I always used to use a metal paint, gunmetal or something, brush it off. So if you haven't used it, get a bit of paint on your brush, you brush it off on a tissue to get 90% of it off, and then you just rub the edges of the tank. I've since learned, after 50 years of modelling and painting tanks, that you don't use gunmetal. You use whatever colour it is. So forest green, use forest green with a little bit of white in it, just a touch, just to make it not the same colour. And the object there is just to make the edges of the whole vehicle just that slightly more noticeable. So if you look at a red fire engine, yeah, it's all red, but you can see where the edge is. Chipped paint. The question I asked you before, whether you undercoat it. So I gather if you do German tanks, you often undercoat it in RAL something or other, which is a sort of a rusty brown tan colour. Yeah, the primer colour. If you look at an Australian ASLAB, it's sand. Can't think of another example. But the point being, if you get to the point of chipped paint, there's two ways of doing it. Either you undercoat it first, put the camouflage colour on, and then there's a method of sanding a little bit off. So like on an M113, in theory, I should have undercoated it in silver because it's aluminium. Aluminium doesn't rust as such. So you're never going to get red streaks on an Australian armoured personnel carrier from rust, except from the turret, which happens to be made out of steel or iron. So one way of doing it is to just rub it back with some very fine sandpaper. You can also use, general purpose thinners, which is more, astringent. It's more active than aggressive than turpentine. So you get some of that, and it's a matter of wearing it off. And you're trying to recreate reality. So, you're not going to get a lot of wear and tear on the engine deck, most probably, but you're going to get wear and tear where the driver climbs into his hole, where the commander climbs in there, where the crew comes in the side, whatever. So it's a matter of that. There is the hairbrushing option, not the hairbrushing, hairspray option, the Vegemite option, and the salt option. Oh. So this is the Vegemite option, I believe. So this is a bit of dishwashing sponge, right? It is a sponge, and you've got to be careful you don't use those cheap stuff. You might wipe stuff off the sink because that's not a sponge. It's, it hasn't got enough holes in it. So the theory is you dip that in Vegemite and you go tap, 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 tap. Then you put the camouflage on. So that's why I asked you about whether you're undercoated. You could do it on a raw plastic one too, I guess. Paint it with your camouflage, first coat of paint, and then you take it into your sink with a light brush or something, and the brush will take the stuff off that's the Vegemite that's hiding your undercoat. Can't say I've ever tried it. Yeah. I was going to say this at the end, but it's appropriate. Now, so many of the companies, MiG, Vallejo, they have thousands of different products to do all of this, a lot of this stuff. So you need to know what's supposed to be underneath. Is it wood?
Quick question. If you're doing a British tank, do you use bromide instead of...
Most probably. It would be good.
Yeah. This conversation is sponsored by Made in Australia.
There is a problem with this too. It's going to end up smelling like Vegemite or bromide.
Yeah, I can't imagine, building a tank like this with decals. It's already been washed and faded and dry brushed, and then before you did all of that, you had to put Vegemite on it. So I reckon this is a better option. I think you mix up your rust color or whatever the undercolor should be, dip that in the paint, squeeze most of it off, and then just touch it onto you. It's the after bit. It's well, it depends. Is it a Soviet T-34 that never really got painted well? And well, possibly,
Certainly no one ever used Vegemite on it.
No, I think I can't remember which one it is. It might be this one. This by the example is, don't weather it that much. That one is coming to shortly. I like that one. But say on this case, there'd be wear up here on top of the rail, the driver getting in on top of the periscope. I'm assuming the commander and gunner would, I don't know how they get in. Same way? All right. So there'd be a bit of wear down this side and possibly that side where they got in, bit of wear around the hatches. And it's just exposing those very small things. Now, bearing in mind that's 35 scale. So if in real life the wear mark is a centimetre, it's 1/35 of 1 centimetre. That wore on the edge of the hatch. You know, you wouldn't get one of these and go, it just due for the scrapyard if it's that worn. Yeah, if you want to learn about rust, go to YouTube. There's half a dozen paints there, and as I said, things like MIG and those, they do a really nice set of red, brown, and tan coloured rust. Is it new rust? Is it old rust? Where did it rust? Did it get a bullet hole through it, like a muffler or something? But it's generally shades of brown and orange. I don't think there's a lot of red rust. Mud is always good. That's why I said I like the little Stuart there. I use pastel chalks. This cost $11 100 years ago. You can use all those colours. A bit of blue and brown never hurts. It's easy enough to do. Just get it out. Just scratch it. If you want, the thing about mud is it wet? Is it dry? If it's dry, it's matte. If it's wet, it's high gloss. It's the best we can represent, I think, in modelling. So what I do with that one, I put a bit of gloss coat lacquer, put it down in the area, scrape this on it. I scraped it hard, so if you have a closer look later on, you'll find that on the front there is lumpy bits. It's not the gentle powder or almost invisible, like spray painted on. And the other thing is just normal exhaust rust, like, M113, the exhaust pipe faces right along here. So there's going to be some grey, black exhaust dust. You have no idea how hard it is to get this. I went to 15 shops before I found one for $3. I got more than one, but so this is eyeshadow maker, and I don't use it myself, but same principle. Just rub it on there. There's the exhaust pipe down there, and just lay it on. I mean, that's grey, but it has changed colour. You can reuse these in washes. That's just a little bit of sponge on a stick. Apparently they use more sophisticated stuff for eyeshadow nowadays.
Do you apply something after the chalks?
I don't. It depends how heavy you use the chalk. I mean, realistically, if I pick it up like that with a normal hand, it's dirty already. It'll come off. But I don't play with my tanks. I build them and put them on a shelf, so that should be all right. As I said, different colours affect different. Will affect. Depends where you put it. I mean, you can even, these are wooden ammunition boxes. You could most probably put a light colour brown on that just to lift it a bit. So as it is now, everything on there is one white colour, one green colour, sorry. And anything that you use over the time, put your excess in some sort of container, because later on, say if this is all supposed to be wet, shoots down there, just spread the paint and just put it on like you put pepper or salt, and it will catch. Have anybody heard of speckling? I didn't until the other day. Speckling is splashing. Exactly. I mean, a bigger brush than this. You load it up with your thinned colour, whatever puddles it's going through. Could be this sort of colour, and I suppose it could be that. And you just hit it like that, and he just puts a few dots on the actual area. I mean, chances are you could end up here, but it's more likely in around the tracks and stuff like that. We've talked about pastel chalks. And my favourite is dust. I love dust. I have an old Badger 200 airbrush, which I think came out of the Ark or around about 1980, which still works. And so I do the same thing as with the wash or dry brushing. I load it up with 80% thinners and a little bit of colour, and then I dust it. So, I mean, not all tanks are going to be muddy. I mean, that's a desert one. The only place I use chalks on that is at the back here. I mean, you've got 4 SS-11 missiles going. So the ammunition boxes that they have at the back are going to be exhaust deposited. I said dust around the wheels and the tracks on that half track. And there's one, I've got a book at home called FAQ, which is a Mig Jimenez book. And it's really good. It covers everything you need to know. It's the only book I've found where it goes into these sort of techniques. Some of the other tank books I've bought over the years, like model, pictures of models being built and that, they often look very sterile and they don't weather at all. So I've got a few photos to show you.
Enamel dust.
Sorry?
Enamel dust as well.
Enamel dust.
You're using enamel.
Oh, yeah. I said I only use, generally enamels. The only time I've used acrylics is when I've, like, acrylic, I think it's Tamiya, black, what do they call it, black tire? Tire black.
Mhm.
That is magic for tires, obviously. The critical thing is bearing in mind we're trying to recreate reality. I mean, I used to paint all my tracks the same until some guy in the army said, "Oh, all tracks are not the same." I said, "Oh, why is that?" I said, "Well, World War I tanks over there most probably would have been cast iron or forged, whatever, but it's still iron. It's going to rust." US Marine Corps LVTP 7A7V2 or whatever it is. You see those come out of the US Marine LSDs. They're totally covered in orange dust except for the rubber pad. I mean, it's bright orange. Yeah, I mean, it's almost that colour. Oh, funny about that. And they don't wash them down. But most other tracks are not just iron anymore. They've got all sorts of other metals in there, so they don't rust as the same. There is a Humbrol thing called track colour, which is a nice shade of brown with a little bit of red in it, and I use that as an undercoat. But that's for another day.
Show us the pictures.
How do we show the pictures? Oh, there you go. So that's a Australian M113 T50 turret machine gun on the outside, so it's very late in the war. But the red dust, you can see that. It's not on the sides, it's on the tracks, it's on the back, it's collected around the jerry cans, but it's on the back, but it's not on the turret. Just an observation. Now there's another one. You can see a bit on top, the wheel hubs. Now, I don't know how often wheel hubs used to leak in those days, but obviously dust is collected around the inside of it, the tyre, not on the rubber tyre, on a bit further out. That's me in a tank. Don't it look pretty? I'm telling the story. Now that tank is Gippsland Tank Rides, and we went through 4 puddles of water, so you can see the flotation panel at the front is a bit damp. But look at the mud; it's all on the tracks, and just a little bit on the edge, but more at the back. So that's what I'm saying. You can't just, I'm going to put weathering on everything. You got to, I mean, you can do what you like, but if you're trying to recreate reality, there's some places you don't go. Like I didn't get any mud on me. On the other hand, the Centurion tank going through, well, close to, I think it would be close to a metre of clay mud. That's what it looks like. But you look, the edge of the tyre, the actual rubber part where it hits the track, has got very little on it. And I think the next one is even more worse. No? Again, just if you look at the bottom left middle, you can see the tracks on the MRV. There's no mud on the back. And we did head into mud and dust. He was doing wheelies with that thing. I think there's one more. Okay, that's the tank at Pucker. It went from the back storage area into one of the hangars. Now, look, the inside of the track is clean. There's been some mud on the suspension unit, and the rest of the mud is on the outside of the guide teeth and on a little bit around the edge of the track. And yet, if you notice, the inner guide teeth have been worn by the idler wheel at the back. I think that's it. That is it. Of course, there ain't no more. Oh, sorry. Any questions on everything you've heard?
John, just to clarify, so it's the in-wash over a matte surface?
Yeah. I mean, the only gloss I ever have is gloss coat to prepare the surface for decals. Yeah. So I guess everybody knows about that. You know, all of these are matte painted tanks to put a decal on it to stop silvering, which is air bubbles, tiny air bubbles caught under the decal. It will make your whole decal look silver. So to prepare the surface for the decals, you paint 1 or 2 coats of gloss varnish, let it dry, and then the next day put your decals on it and then seal that with matte varnish because the rest of the tank is matte.
Do you click adjust the area that you're going to put decal on?
Yeah. I've just built a M113 Mandrake. Mandrake is just a standard APC with a gun shield and 50 cal, and they needed another fitter's vehicle, so they just mounted a permanent A-frame on the front. Used to come and drop, hook up to the bog tank, damage tank, whatever, and just pull it out. Now that is painted in a very dark, early American olive drab before we went to our own olive drab lusterless. I've put 4 coats over the decals, so it becomes the same as the other surface. It's taken days.
There's a guy on YouTube called Night Shift. Yeah. Night Shift. Martin Kovacs. And he does different styles of weathering, and he explains it really well. And he the good so he uses the sponge techniques, and then might put like the metal colour in the middle of it, representing all the different things. So well worth having a look. See.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do a bit on some aviation stuff. Thanks, John. John, all the stuff that John's covered on the tools, materials, and the techniques, they're all transferable to any type of model. The key is how much you use them and how well you use them. For me, and again, John and I are in violent agreement over this. The aim in making a model is to try and replicate the real thing, the look of the real thing, as accurately as possible. And the key to a good-looking worn finish, the museum folk, by the way, call it distressed, a distressed finish. Poor little tank, he looks so distressed, doesn't he? They call it a distressed finish, but the idea, look, really, from my point of view, keep it accurate to type, keep it to scale, and don't overdo it. Photos of the real thing in the real environment, which you can see here for the Spitfire in the War Memorial, and this is very much as it looked in the middle 1940s. Try and look at photographs of the real thing and work out how much of that you think you're going to be able to reproduce in your scale. This is a detailed close-up shot of the port wing root on the Spitfire, but just look at the detail that you can see in there in terms of wear, marks, muck. Look at the quality of that green paint finish up there. For God's sake, that must have been someone that hasn't been trained in spray painting, or at least it had been worn for a long period of time. So start, if you possibly can, with the real thing, or at least photographs of the real thing. Don't forget that it needs to be in the right environment. John's mentioned some of his AFVs in different environments. The wear and tear weathering on a Spitfire in the Northern Territory of Australia may look, really quite different to that in Northwest Europe or in the North African desert. So try and pick the photos that depict your model in the environment you want to model it in. Remember that wear and tear, or wear and weathering, are rather different processes in the real world, and they may need to be treated slightly differently in the scale world too. The wear tends to deplete, damage, or remove the original paintwork. Abrasion, let's see if we can get one here. Abrasion along leading edges, for instance, as you can see here on the War Memorials 109, due to dust in the slipstream, this kind of thing, can be seen easily enough on wing leading edges and on propeller blades. Those of us that have been around aeroplanes know that ground crew always leave their mark on an aeroplane. In particular, it's often most visible along the wing root. Again, this is the 109, and not an entirely perfect example, but you can see here the damage. This is the line of the walkway, so you are supposed to walk on a 109 between there and there, but look at the damage that's been done on the wing to fuselage fillet there. And you see the marks here are going upwards. This is where boots have been scuffed up against the side, I think, as people have been leaning into the cockpit, leaning up to the fuel filler, which is just above there, that sort of thing. Again, it's specific to a particular type and that particular area on the airplane. So wear tends to deplete, damage, or remove the original paintwork. The degree to which the removal is visible depends very much on the circumstance, but it's not impossible to see wing roots worn away to bare metal by the combination of dirt and dust and mud on airmen's boots while they've been walking up on, or even the crew's boots as they walk up onto the wing root there. Notice that heavily worn aluminium will often be shiny rather than matte because it's actually been worn down through continuous walking. There'll be, and this isn't quite so easy to see, but look around the cockpit here. Look at the little flecks of paint that have been taken off along here, down along here, anywhere that you can see where this is a Spitfire again. The little panel opens up on the side here, help the pilot get in. You can see marks down on the side here from I think that's an electrical connection down on the side there. But you can see scuffs and marks around the cockpit because that's where the activity concentrated on a single seat fighter aircraft, along access panels and so on as well. Even more noticeable there on the War Memorials 109. Look at the wear around the cockpit. On the sill here, the cockpit hinges on the right-hand side, so it opens up. Everyone that gets in there has to throw themselves over that edge there, and that's why the very dark grey that have been spread along there has been worn down almost to bare metal along there.
Do they use enamel washers on that?
I don't think they had the enamel left at the end of the war when
Perhaps the Americans helped them.
that there is the date that aircraft was refurbished, 31st of the 12th, 44. They didn't have a lot of time or money or paint. Anyway, to reproduce this, it is possible, having painted it, to use very fine emery paper and to do the same as has happened in real life, as long as John says, as long as you've got the right undercoat colour underneath there. You can achieve a very effective wear pattern in scale. And it is possible, doing the reverse in a way, it is possible to replicate worn metal by using a silver pencil, or indeed just a 2B pencil on the wing roots, as you see here. That is all just silver pencil to replicate damage to the wing root, to the walkway area. Again, you can see the walkway line down there, and the majority of it is in access to the engine and to the cockpit. Damage includes paint fading due to strong sunlight or other atmospheric effects, and this can be replicated by airbrushing, as John has mentioned before. You can apply this effect overall, but not necessarily uniformly or to the same extent. I use this technique for the desert camouflage kitty hawk that I've got here, which you can come and have a look at, but I think I've got a picture to put up on there, which just shows that you can dull down the colours, more so on the upper surfaces than the side surfaces, and certainly rather different on the undersides. But it's easy enough to do using, in this case, just a very diluted mixture through the airbrush at low pressures of just a sandy colour, a generic sandy colour, to give that effect of bleached paint, because the sun wasn't very kind to paint in the North African deserts. Weathering itself tends to, in my mind at least, tends to add something on top of the paintwork. If you check underside photographs like this late Mark Spitfire, take a look at the mark that's collected under here, behind the chute ejection, or the shell ejection chutes, I should say. They're behind the cannon. Look at all the stuff on this. This is a radiator. That's an air. God knows why there's all that stuff there. These are oil streaks from the rear of the engine on both sides here, and you see, uniquely for the Spitfire, and uniquely in almost any other aircraft, the line of these depends on the local airflow in the area where they are. This is why it's important to take a look at photographs of your subject. They're characteristic for a specific type. Fuel and oil stains in this case are typical for, can be very specific for a particular type. This is a model, of course, but you can see a little bit of dust and mud and a little bit of grime faintly put on behind wheel well. So this was used in northern France, so not necessarily filthy dirty, and not used for very long, of course, with the collapse of France. But again, take a look at the underside of an airplane. Don't be afraid to weather there as well. Exhaust stains are so much fun. This is this little airplane here, but the exhaust stains on the Kitty Hawk were mostly black, but grey around the edges. Now that's not unusual, but if you find photographs, you'll see exactly how the weathering looks behind exhaust on the particular aircraft that you're looking at. Do your best. That what I use here is a little bit of airbrush work, and then some pastel chalks, which I grind up on a bit of salt, a bit of sandpaper. I come up and give this a try. I've got a spare Tomahawk here to have a go at. If you want to have a go at applying some pastel chalks, please feel free. That's only the primer finish. I can overcoat them, but come up and give it a try and see how easy it is to get a very impressive effect. And the good thing about pastel chalks is it's not that hard to remove them. You can build up very, very slowly, but if you've overdone it, then it's not that hard to brush them off or cover them over. This is a typical example of a fuel stain from an inline engine on a single seat fighter. They tend to follow a curve over the wing, obviously because of the way the airflow curves up over the wing next to the fuselage. On multi-engine types, propeller rotation on 2 or 4 engines on the wings may change the pattern on port and starboard. A lot of folks miss that. If you're lucky enough to be able to find a plan view of your aircraft type, then I've only seen one model of a V-17 in this club that has actually accurately portrayed the way the exhaust marks go over the top of the wings. They don't come out of those 4 little vents behind the engines. That's clear air. It goes around those vents, and it's very particular, very specific to that type. Again, photographs are the key. Here's another thing on the and this seems to be the thing of the jet age, but on the upper fuselage of single engine jets in particular, you'll get black scuffs. We can have a bit of a look at them. This is on. You see, they're all applied with little dark. Most of that is pencils or little bits of black paint, but these are scuff marks from the boots worn by the aircrew who straddle the avionics compartment or the engine or whatever it is that they're looking at on top of the fuselage. And it's I say, it seems. I mean, it was always the case on the RAAF's Mirages, and with the current trends towards grey painted airplanes, they're a lot easier to pick up than they used to be with dark camouflage airplanes like this one. But as I say, pastel chalks, a bit of a dark, just a pencil or a silver pen can make all the difference there. This is a lovely example. Anyone that knows the Tornado will know it's a filthy, dirty airplane at the best of times. Imagine trying to reproduce this. But the intriguing thing here is, see down on the base here on the horizontal stabilizer, you can see all of these marks here are boot marks. I mean, there's a lot of dirt and dust and so on there, but all these black scuffs, that's from boots. This sign here says nicht betreten, which in German means no step. Ironical, really, isn't it? But anyway.
What about a sign that says take your boots off?
Yes, why not? Why not? Yes, this is a delicate airplane you're walking on, Anyway, yeah, imagine anyone that's built because this is the thrust reverser down the back here, this sort of bucket type shaped thing, half bucket thing. It directs all the engine exhaust up over the fin, and it leaves the aircraft looking filthy. It's a very specific weathering to apply if you've built a model of a Tornado. Now, I'm going to be a bit contentious here in breaking with the aircraft weathering traditionally seen in a lot of model magazines. To my mind, too many weathering techniques and products on the market have too much grip on the modeling fraternity with little justification in terms of the realism that they bring to a model. As a RAFI who's worked for many years around aircraft of varying ages, may I warn you against highlighting engraved panel lines with dark washes. It doesn't really look like that. The effect in scale is overdone compared to the real thing. Don't forget, looking at a 1/72nd scale model from a metre away should be like looking at the real thing from 72 metres away. At that distance, panel lines often can't be seen at all. So there's perhaps no realism in highlighting them. Equally overdone is this need to spray darker paint along panel lines or to airbrush a dash of a slightly lighter colour in the middle of a panel. Usually on a model, and I mean there are people that are past masters at this, they do a very fine job of it, but it looks much too regular on a model. We need to realise that no aircraft paint job fades uniformly across the whole of the aircraft. In this particular case, let me show you, to my mind, one of the most disappointing looking airplanes. This is a Hercules gunship, as you can see here. This won best aircraft in the RPMS USA Nationals some 20 or so years ago. From my point of view, look at the unrealistic spraying of faint dark paint along every single panel line. I can see this better from behind. Look at that. Every single frigging panel line, is highlighted, and perfectly neatly, all of them. And yet, you know, if that was an accurate reflection of painting, then where's the abrasion on the leading edges of the wings, or any mark at all on the propeller blades? There's no. That's right. And there are folks around this table that have worked a long time on Hercs, aren't they, Greg? That's right. So, to my mind, let me show you the real thing. Here's a photograph of a Hercules gunship with a few bits of overspray and extra spray around here just to cover up a few cracks or where something's been changed. But look at it. It is entirely random and manky. You can see the extra bits of spray work up here, but that's just covering up. You know, it's for corrosion protection as much as anything else. But it doesn't look like that model, I'm sorry to say. This type of effect, I would venture to say, is more likely to be the norm for most real aircraft than the previous photographs. Now let's take a look. There's a lovely shot. Look at that. Hey, who can hear the sound of freedom? Or at least two of us, or three or four of us. But look at this. This is I believe it's true to say that this photograph was used by our illustrious president to paint his lovely Zvezda C-130 a couple of years ago, an award-winning paint finish. Look at all the different colors and tones on that. Can you see any regularity in there at all? You'll notice that parts of the leading edges have been repainted. You haven't even bothered lining up the camouflage look around here. But I mean, look at that. What color's that? It's not the light. That's supposed to be a light blue-green. There's the dark green, and there's the sandy green color. That's entirely, goodness knows where that's come from. Notice also the dirty marks from the hatch behind the cockpit here, which is where the flight engineers would walk, and all the ground crew would walk down here. They would do whatever they need to do on top of the airplane. Look at the way these little panels here have been, the removable panels here have been repainted. Look at the work around this is where the life rafts are hidden above the inner flaps here. Look at the work around there. Look at all of it. The whole thing shows. You can take a closer look. If this looks like a panel line, no, that is the wing walkway line. I think that is black, in an inch wide black, so that's why it shows up. It is not a black panel line. So I could, by way of an alternative, show you. Now look at that. Is that not a paint job that you would love to be able to replicate on a model airplane? That is a Danish Draken. In the 70s, the Danes painted their aircraft matte olive green, and the paint was shocking. It went to yellow. It went to yellow very quickly, and they desperately tried to touch up all the panel lines to stop all that Scandinavian moisture getting in inside the structure. It's my dream to be able to repaint a model looking a bit like that. So there are times when spray painted panel lines are appropriate. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I could go on, but I guess perhaps you get my drift. Wear and weathering really should accurately show the use, the misuse, and the environmental hardships endured by an aircraft, or indeed anything. They can be entirely unique to a particular type and often to a specific machine. Remember, if you study pictures of the real thing, then you can understand what has happened, and then you can do your best to replicate it. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I've just got, that's still working? I've just got one comment. We went, my wife and I recently went off to Newcastle and spent a bit of time at Fighter Town at Williamtown. I was talking to a RAF ex-RAF, what do you call them, mechanics? Techo. He was showing us around. He went to a Daphne de Duel, a twin Mirage there. I was standing next to the wing and I was asking him about the grey panel line on the aircraft. And he said, oh, yeah, well, we bogged that out. So I measured it. It was 3 millimetres wide. It was medium grey. You divide that by 72, and that's 0.05 of a millimetre. I dare you to reproduce that on an aircraft. Oh, yeah. Well, human hair is 0.005.
It's like panel lines on top of P-51 Mustang wing. They were bogged, then sanded, and then painted. Even in natural metal aircraft, there are exceptions where they do.
Yeah, he was also saying the F-35s there. He said they have to bog every panel line, otherwise, hello, I'm here. And they have to bog every rivet or what do you screw? Fastener. So,
a whole different and like racing aircraft, they can be pretty clean. Some people don't like weathering, period. Some people do.
And while Greg Ford up here is talking, if you'd like to see an example in my book of a perfectly weathered aircraft, go and look at his Corsair on the back. Look where he's weathered it. Look how you can see the blue grey outer colour. In some places you can see it worn down to the yellowy green primer, and then in the middle of the patch you can see shiny metal. And I think it's a bloody fabulous example of just exactly what I've been talking about. Thank you very much for bringing it along, Greg.